We would have forgotten. Please use the chat to say who you are, ask questions, feedback, share your email address. If we haven't already got your email address, so some of you have got an email directly from us, some of you I don't recognize the names. And if you would like to be kept informed in future, please put your email address in the chat. And all questions are the right questions. There's no right or wrong answers here. And the space here is a safe, inclusive and collaborative space. So if you're new to this way of working, not Zoom meetings, but the sort of interface that we're trying to create, please feel it's a safe and welcoming space. And Maddie, do you want to do this bit?
Sure. Yeah, so some of you we've worked with before, there's some new faces as well, which is amazing. It's really nice to welcome you all. So the Policy Influencers Network group is really a kind of part of what UAC is trying to enable across the sector. And it came out of work that we did with Miriam and Patricia and Connor, who are all here, who coming in from Northern Ireland, and work that they did around bringing together different practitioners and decision makers from different departments across different local authorities across Northern Ireland into a space where they could talk together without sort of worry and in sort of openness about around the theme of community access to land for food growing. And it was a really great format, and so this idea of having something similar but across our UK wide network and felt really valuable, and has had a lot of support from people that we work with this idea. So this is the second ping. And so it's a format and community that is evolving together. So we really welcome your, your feedback and input about how we evolve it as we go through 2022 and we build our sort of community of policy influencers. As Jeremy said, it is a safe space for dialogue, collaboration, peer learning, and to build connections and solidarity which continue outside of and between these sessions, and to do that in order to develop, amplify and accelerate policies and action to advance urban and peri-urban agroecology. So that, depending on who you are, where you're working and the context, that will mean different things, but that's it's right that it does. So we're holding online gatherings every couple of months, and looking at doing it at different scales. So like we had the Northern Ireland scale, and this is the kind of bigger UK wide scale where we can have experiment with different nested scales of pings down the line.
Okay. Come on, go.
So we'd like to do a very quick kind of opening round. Maybe if you could just stop the screen share, thank you, so we can see who we are as a group in the room, and we'll do, I feel it's really worth us just saying hello and who we are and where we are, even though it takes a bit more time. It's still really worth it, and then if we just keep it brief, then when we go into our discussion breakout rooms after the presentation part, we'll just be able to sort of deepen more into who we are and what we do and what we want from this this discussion. So I'll start. I'm Maddie. I'm one of the coordinators with Jeremy of the Urban Agriculture Consortium, and I too am based in Bristol. I'll pass to Duncan, and then maybe Duncan, you could pass on to the next person, and we'll just go around just to.
Perfect. Yes, I will. Yes. So yeah, I'm Duncan. I'm working with Nourish Scotland around COP26. climate change COPs and how the role of local food systems in helping us meet some of the climate change challenges. I will go to Patricia, please.
Hi, I'm Patricia. I'm Social Farms and Gardens in Belfast, and Maddie has already said we've had 3 workshops with local council officers, which were really interesting, and this is a great follow-on from that. So pleased to be here today. I'll pass to Jeremy, beside me.
This one.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've just said my bit already. Just really pleased. There's 24 people in the room at the moment, or 23, and that's what we were anticipating, somewhere around that. And it's a really interesting mix of people. As I say, some names I recognise, others I don't. What I'd like to get out of this is just to get a flavour of where you would like us to go with this next. We're sketching out a diary. We'll come back to that later. And I'm going to pass on to Tony Little.
Oh yeah, Tony Little. I'm working for the Land Workers Alliance. A lot of work really around supply chains. So it's creating opportunities for small-scale agroecological producers. Public procurement is increasingly an area that we're working on. I am particularly interested and perhaps a little concerned in the producer voice in public procurement, and I'm particularly interested in exploring the issues and how they affect producers. So I'm going to move on to Eleanor.
Hi there, my name's Eleanor Huddlestone and I'm Planning Policy Assistant at Lancaster City Council. We're working on our climate emergency review of the local plan at the moment, so that's what I'm here today to talk about, and how we've incorporated like food growing into our planning policy. Oh, sorry, I've got to pick something up now. I'll pass on to Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm also in Lancaster. I work at the university, but also very closely with our food partnership here in North Lancashire. And we've been doing work with the council, and I'm going to speak about that later today. And I'll pass to Simon.
Hi, I'm Simon Ruston. I'm an independent planning consultant with specialist knowledge of agriculture and forestry at a kind of sustainable and low impact level. And I've also, I think I can say this, Maddie, I've also just been invited to become an associate of Green Futures, which is Jeremy and Maddie's organisation. Thank you. Oh, and I'll pass to Joe in Middlesbrough.
Right, hi, yes, Joe Dunn, Middlesbrough Environment City, it's a charity I work for, and I'm the Food Partnership Coordinator here. Also, Northern Pathfinder location for the Urban Agriculture Consortium, and generally just kind of sticking my finger in any food related pies that I can to try and move the food system along towards healthier, more sustainable, that type of thing. Yeah, I love it all. It's great. And I just, yeah, I was just in the middle of emailing my counterpart in Middlesbrough Council who said he would attend, and I can't see him here. So I'm just prodding. But yeah, that's kind of what I do a lot of. I prod and I facilitate and I try and make things happen. And some sticks and some doesn't, but I really want this one to stick. So yeah, I'm going to pass to Ellie.
Hey, I'm Ellie Salvage and I work for Leeds City Council in the sustainability team. So yeah, we've recently made some commitments to cut carbon and source food more locally within our council. So Sonia Woodcock from Food Wisely's asked that I come along because I'm going to be sort of the food lead coming into the new year. So yeah, attending anything to do with local sustainable food really at the moment. I need to pass someone, Elizabeth Westaway. Have you not been yet?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm in Swansea. I'm co-founder and director of Brain Real Food for Nutrition. CIC, which is learning how to grow, measure and promote the benefits of nutrient-dense food. I'm also in an initiative to get Swansea to become a sustainable food place. So yeah, it'd be great if I can get some local councillors attending the next ping. And I'm also an associate of UAC. So I will pass to Alan Bogle.
Yeah, hi everyone. I am Alan Bogle and I am Derry City and Strabane District Council in Northern Ireland's new Sustainable Food Coordinator. We've recently been accepted under the Sustainable Food Place Network, and I'm interested in all things food and all things sustainable, and I hope to build a sustainable food system here in Derry that's based around local, fresh and seasonal food. And I will pass to Connor, who's disappeared, who had a telephone conversation with earlier on today. Are you still there, Connor?
I think you might have to go and collect his wee boy.
Yeah, it's gone to go home.
He's disappeared, has he? So now I have to play a memory game and work out who has not.
I think
Miriam,
Fran and Silvio.
Miriam, I'll choose. But
Thanks, Alan. I'm Miriam, based in Belfast, working for Social Farms and Gardens Northern Ireland and working with Patricia and Connor. And I have a couple of apologies for today of people who would have liked to have come but couldn't make it.
Okay.
And Poppy?
Hi, I'm Poppy. I'm from Incredible Edible Lambeth in South London, and I'm working to, support our residents to grow food and to work alongside the council. And they've just got their the Citizens Climate Assembly from Lambeth Council. One of the recommendations is more food growing. So working with the council to try and make that a reality in our highly densely populated part of the country. And I'm really interested in how to make policy, really influence policy, because I can see it as big, very big systems, which take quite a long time to change. And I'll pass on to Janie, who's down below there.
Thanks, Poppy. Poppy and I have worked together, and for some reason your name was coming up as mine, Poppy, on the Zoom. Anyway, I'm worked with Incredible Edible, previously Incredible Edible Lambeth. So I've worked with Poppy for the last couple of years, a year mostly. And I also working with Maddie on some mapping ideas around food. That's a really interesting project. I'm on the National Board of Incredible Edible, and like one other person on this call, I'm a prodder and a nudger and a persuader and everything else. So I'm really interested, one of my particular interests is in church land and how that is made available for communities to grow food. So that's a big one for me. I'm about to take up a new job as co-lead at Oxford City Farm. And I don't know who's not spoken. So
I've got Silvio, Mark, Lucy.
I can see Lucy's got her hand up. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Yeah, I'm Lucy Taylor. I'm the Community Land Advisory Service Coordinator for in Wales for Social Farms and Gardens. And my primary job really is to increase access to land for community-led green space projects. My background's in town planning, in planning departments, in local authorities, but deal with a lot of sort of persuading of local authorities to give leases and licenses to community projects, probably 80 to 90% of which are community food growing, and do increasing amounts of work with private landowners. But whilst demand for space has increased, there are local authorities that I would say are doing good things, but I'm still battling on a daily basis with a fair few in Wales to make their their processes proportionate, so it's easier to get on the ground and start growing. But yeah, I've been working with Miriam, Patricia and Connor on little sort of projects in Northern Ireland that could do with a bit of help on land access and planning, getting planning permissions.
Okay, I think Karen hasn't spoken.
There, I'm Karen from Social Farms and Gardens in Scotland, but I'm representing the wider Community Growing Forum Scotland, who's got people like Keep Scotland Beautiful and Green Space Scotland, and some on-the-ground projects and a couple councils who, unfortunately, time pressures, they can't be here because they're busy implementing their local food growing strategies. I'd like to think we're working very much on bits of legislation that have been pushed through with the SNP Green Pact, and that includes local food consultation and the Good Food Nation consultation and National Planning Framework 4 and various other bits and bobs. Glad to be here.
Hey, Fran, I think.
Yes, I'm Fran Halsall. I'm in Sheffield. I'm the Food Partnership Chef Food. I'm the Urban Agriculture Coordinator. Which basically means knocking on lots of doors, having lots of conversations about finding land and also the people who might be able to grow on that land. Talking a lot with public health at the moment, which is quite interesting. And in my other roles, I am also a community gardener with Regather, which is a trading cooperative, but we have a gardening arm. We try and help people grow. And I also work for Foodworks, which is traditionally a food surplus organisation, but they're also moving into volunteer-based growing. So I'm managing their first farm project.
Okay, I'm just going to read out who I haven't. Silvio.
Hello, my name is Silvio Caputo. I teach and research at University of Kent. I teach architecture in the School of Architecture and Planning there. I research on urban agriculture. I've been doing that for 10 years or so, involved in a couple of projects, one of which is international and looks at measuring the level of resource efficiency in urban agriculture. There are lots of studies on quantifying how much food we can grow in cities, but not sufficient studies about how energy and water efficient and resource efficient is urban agriculture. And we're doing that. We're coming to a completion of the project in a few months, and we are producing a report, and maybe you're interested in reading it when it's ready.
Yeah, thank you. Gary?
Yeah, hi all. In fact, I've just come off a previous call with Silvio, so good to see you again, Silvio. I'm here as Chief Executive Officer for Open Newtown, sort of community development, social enterprise. But for my sins, I'm also Welsh Manager for Social Farms and Gardens. Obviously, a lot of colleagues here, but also actually a lot of partners helping us to deliver some of our work. And I think I've got a few minutes to try and talk to you about sort of Welsh policy, let's say, developments and what we've been doing. But I will say to you, Jeremy, I've got to go at 10 to 4 to pick the kids up, otherwise I get told off.
Okay, 10 to 3 now. Okay, you've got an hour to get you in. I think Mark Walton, I think you're the only person who hasn't spoken.
And John as well, John LaCorney.
Oh, John, sorry, John LaCorney.
But yeah, Mark Walton, Director at Shared Assets. We are a social enterprise that supports community use of land for all kinds of public benefit. So not just food growing, but also woodlands, parks, that sort of thing. In terms of sort of work that we're currently involved in that directly or kind of relates to this, we're involved in a fringe farming project, which is specifically looking at supporting peri-urban agriculture in London, Bristol, Glasgow and Sheffield. This year and next year also, I think some work in Cardiff, and slightly less urban but connected, doing quite a lot of work both in Wales and England, looking at the potential for the use of county farms and local authority owned farms to expand opportunities for kind of community and agroecological farming. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, John.
Yeah, I'm John LaCorney. Apologies for being late. I've just come from a food bank networking meeting in Sheffield. I'm the, well, now retired Chief Executive of Healy City Farm in Sheffield, and amongst other things, we've got a network of 12, I think it is now, community gardens of food growing gardens scattered across Sheffield. I've got a few other hats as well. I suppose what's interesting me a bit at the moment is I'm on the Yorkshire and Humber, the very grandly named Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission. I'm on a panel which is called Nature, Land, Food, and a few other things I can't remember. So I'm quite interested in how I can feed into this panel on the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission, which the food bit appears to be mainly dominated by the National Farmers Union. So whether one could have a dialogue with the National Farmers Union or not a dialogue, I'm still trying to work out. So I'd be quite interested in people's views on dealing with the National Farmers Union.
Okay, cool. I've got 2 more people have joined. Kate from Dundee.
Hi, I guess we're just having a little introduction.
Yeah, very quickly, yeah.
I do apologise for being so late. I got caught up with a chatty person. So I work for Dundee City Council. I'm the Community Allotments Officer responsible for setting up community growing spaces in the more deprived parts of the city, and just about to set up quite a major market garden, like a social enterprise community market garden space in the city.
Okay, thank you. And Sarah from Sustain has just joined us as well.
Sorry, just coming from the public sector procurement webinar we're running. I'm Sarah Williams, I'm the Programmes Director at Sustain. So we are and have been working with several policy influencers, I suppose, across the Sustainable Food Places network, and through all the work historically we do around food growing and food growing networks, as well as being involved in the Fringe Farming project, which I think Mark probably has mentioned. I see Mark's face here.
Okay, thank you all. I know it's taken a little bit of time, but I think it's well worth it. Maddie, are you there, Maddie?
Yeah.
Okay, should we go back to just look at our last few slides, see where we got to? Where am I? This one here.
Yeah, great. So just go through what we're hoping to go through in this session. And it's amazing that there's just to hear the diversity of people in the space, and the rich discussions that will ensue, and so much experience and much to share. So I feel very honoured to be sort of facilitating this space, and yeah, thank you for being here. We're going to do a very brief piece on Urban Agriculture Consortium, particularly just for the benefit of those who are new to us. We'll then invite Duncan to talk about the food and climate stuff that came out of COP26 from his kind of insider perspective, and how that can shape the work in the different localities and regions across the UK. We'll then go to Eleanor, who will be looking at the particular connection between food and climate and planning in Lancaster, and she's very kindly stepped in for Susanna Dart, who wasn't able to be here, who's the climate lead in Lancaster, but Eleanor will also be bringing her planning perspective as well, which is great. We'll then want to hold a good chunk of the time that we'll do in breakout. So we've got a couple of sort of leading questions for you before we come back, and we'll feed back with a Mentimeter and just kind of look at next steps. So we've got 2 hours in total. And so without further ado, this is just an overview really of Urban Ag Consortium in terms of this particular policy influencing strand, and how that sits in the context of our wider work. So you can see the red dots are the policy influencer gatherings. The turquoisey ones are the sessions that were held in Northern Ireland. You can see you are here in that sort of dark teal dot.
Moved on a bit.
Oh yeah, that was
last week.
should be over the reddish dot, which is today, and having started a good year ago with our Northern Pathfinder cities who are represented here from the northern cities and also in Scotland and Northern Ireland. So our cluster of Northern Pathfinders are Lancaster, Middlesbrough, Leeds, Sheffield and Nottingham. And we've been kind of gathering as a cluster to work on areas of common interest and common challenge, which has been great. If you just go to the next slide, okay, yes, you haven't got the other one in there. I just threw another one in there, but it needs to, yes, don't worry. So I was just going to say that, yeah, that the pings are one piece of work within a sort of constellation of kind of little projects that we are helping to convene around. Janie mentioned food land mappers, and we're bringing together a really interesting bunch of mappers. Lambeth is one, Lancaster is another, Newcastle is another, Land Explorer that was originated within shared assets is another, because this mapping aspect is so critical to a lot of the work that people are trying to do, but it's also something that is lacking and the data that we need. Another piece that we're working on together is around farm starts, and this year the Northern Pathfinder cities have been doing a process of sort of feasibility development to look at how they set up farm starts in their cities, so incubator farms, training for new entrants. So those are just a couple of the things that we've been convening. And Jeremy wanted to highlight a kind of a bit of news from across the pond. Do you want to talk to that, Jeremy?
Yeah, this came to our attention through Social Farms and Gardens and the seminar that Silvio held a month or so ago. So we just thought we'd highlight this in case you haven't seen this. New York City, which has always been famous for its community gardens, but has established an Office of Urban Agriculture and an Urban Agriculture Advisory Board as part of the city's governance to integrate urban agriculture into resiliency, public education outreach, promotion, protecting and expanding, advance policy and legislation, resources, expand the availability of healthy food, but also look at youth development and education. Now, if we were to write a manifesto, a template of good practice for a city in the UK or a town, might it look like this? So let's have one of those in each of our cities and towns, and we'll talk a bit further about how we might look at this going forward into 2022. I wonder, Maddie, if at this point we might just ask for a few words from Northern Ireland and Wales and Scotland with reflecting back on the work we've done so far.
Yeah, certainly. I'd say that would mean Duncan and Eleanor might need to reduce their.
Okay, well let's go through the presentations then, and then we'll ask for comments later. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just see how we go with time.
Okay.
Be lovely to hear from them.
So Duncan from Nourish, I will just let him talk for himself. I'm going to hand over to you, Duncan.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you very much, Maddie. It's lovely to be here. I will share my screen. Okay. Yeah, I will share my screen with a little presentation I've done around COP. So yeah, so I'm speaking to you as representing Nourish Scotland. I may not sound Scottish, but yeah, my family left Dundee when I was born, so I blame them that I sort of sound English. But in my heart, I'm still Scottish, and I'm proud to work with Nourish Scotland. We're an organisation set up by a farmer just outside of Edinburgh called Pete Ritchie, behind the Good Food Nation bill, a big champion of that as well. And we have spent the last 18 months engaging on COP, trying to bring food and agriculture into the climate change negotiations. And our programme of work will finish at the end of next month, because it was very much a case of up to the Glasgow COP and one more month. And I'm going to try and explain to you what we did there, but also what happened around COP, and give you a couple of the key recommendations that have come out of it, which are relevant to this group. And are very much are thinking about the reason for why a Scottish organisation needs to engage in Glasgow COP is we recognise that food and agriculture are a huge part of the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. They're without doubt one of the leading causes of it, but they're also a massive part of the solution. And we were shocked to discover that they're still not really taken seriously at international negotiations. National governments are scared of including climate change in agriculture for whatever reasons. I'm sure you can surmise them. And what we've also found there's a lot of action happening locally, and a lot of people are recognizing the things we can do locally. And one of the best ways to tackle the climate crisis is for our own food choices, our growing choices, how we look at all of this. So it's all kinds of interrelated things. And the message we've had is a lot of the solutions are happening locally. They're happening. We're not waiting for national governments. National governments are behind the trend. So how can we start meeting and tackling that ourselves? So when we looked at this, but we already know that we've been talking about climate change, and we've known that climate change is happening since the early 70s, and we've known that climate change will cause a food crisis. Indeed, Boris Johnson at the COP said if we're not careful, climate change is going to cause food shortages in the near future. And the argument to that is, in Madagascar, we're having the first ever climate change food famine at the moment. And previously, this picture from the Sahara in 1974, we had climate change famine then. So we've known climate change and food are linked, and we have to start realizing that. And we also know we haven't done enough about it. We have been warned repeatedly. I've been working on climate change since 1990. I've marched, I've been arrested, I've protested, I've tried lobbying, and still the action is very, very slow. But now we're seeing an acceleration, particularly happening at the local level, as people are going, we want to change. So, and the other thing we have to recognise is that we can't look at climate change alone. Out of COP26 came the Glasgow Climate Pact, and this emphasised the need to link climate change to nature, to social nexus, and that's people in urban and rural environments, rich and poor countries, rich and poor systems. They all have to come together, and if we're going to tackle climate change, you need to think about all of the areas of it to avoid maladaptation, which is when you sort of go for a low carbon food system, but it's one that's built on ultra processed food that makes everybody very sick and is still causing trees to be chopped down. So you've got to think about things as interlinked, because the problems are interlinked. And it's really important to do that. And it's one of the few things that we found was exciting about this from our government, is they have linked climate and nature together. They have recognised that you have to work on the two to have the solutions. So coming out of COP, 1.5 degrees is still alive. Only just, but it's still alive. We can still make it. And it is really important that we work towards 1.5 degrees. Every country has agreed that more of them are going to come back with stronger plans to help us meet 1.5 degrees at COP27. People are starting to recognise the urgency, particularly as the poorer countries in the world who are the most impacted are putting pressure on places like the UK, but also we're also realising that things are starting to change and happen. And a lot more money is being put into the pot from climate finance, which is where the rich countries are putting money aside to help countries mitigate and adapt for climate change in the developing world. But this opens up all kinds of funds and a change in the narrative. And again, the link is there. And it's important to think about the term net zero, because net zero, a lot of people have been talking about, and net zero will only be met if we change the food system. It will only be met if we restore soil. It will only be met if we look at our lifestyles, consumption, and it'll only be met if we have a massive transition to things like green energy. But net zero is key to meeting 1.5 degree target. And the reason I say this is because in 2021, we are at the moment at 1.1 degrees of climate change. And in every single country of the world, they have had some kind of extreme weather event. We had ours last weekend, the storm that hit us was a very rare storm that hit us. We've seen flooding in Germany, flooding in the US. We've seen wildfires. We've seen famine. We've seen crop failures. So what we're saying is this is all at 1.1 degree. 1.5 degree the target, it gets worse. And if we go, at the moment we're on course for 2.7 degrees, which is 2.5 times the magnitude of what we're at now. So it's 1.7 times the magnitude. So it's worth remembering that it will get worse, so we have to do everything we can to tackle this. And it's so important, if we're going to build resilience of cities, build resilience of communities, is to work on food and agriculture at the urban level as well, because we are going to see interruptions to the global supply chains. We are going to see food harvest becoming a bit more unpredictable, and we are going to see food prices rising. So we have to do everything we possibly can. And a lot of the biggest bread baskets in the world, in America, South America, parts of Europe, are going to be impacted by climate change. So everything we can do at a local level to protect our local community and provide food is so, so important. And I can't overstate how important that is. So a couple of things that came out of out of climate COP that are worth noting about, particularly around food and agriculture, because there's not a lot in there. One of them is the Coronavia Joint Working Group on Agriculture. This looks at soil nutrient use. You can see all of this. But this is going to be agreed next year. This is going to be finalised next year. Every country is looking at how they can make agriculture better at an urban and a rural level. And it was the first time ever agroecology was in a draft text at anything coming out of a climate change COP. It was in the draft text, it was there, the EU signed up to it, it was pushed, it was supported. Unfortunately, India, the US, and a few other countries threw their toys out the pram and insisted that agroecology got removed from the final text. However, the fact it was in there for the first time means it will almost definitely be there in the final text. And that is a really important thing for us to look at when we're looking at working in the UK at local level, subnational level, because it's going to be agreed at the UN level. We have signed up to this as a country, so agroecology will get in there and we can really start using that to lever change if the government is being slow to act. And the other thing is there was a global methane pledge. No one expected this. And this is about limiting methane impacts and emissions by 30% by 2030. This is really exciting because methane is a really, really horrible, powerful greenhouse gas, but it only lives for 10 years. And if we can reduce the methane in the atmosphere, we will start bringing temperatures down a lot quicker than any other way, because carbon will stay in the atmosphere for 30, 40, I mean, hundreds of years probably, in fact. So, and the thing about methane that's so relevant to our work is the main sources are livestock, rice, then waste and natural gas. So we have to take it seriously when we're looking at it, because livestock and rice are going to be part of this discussion. So we have to think about that in the food choices, because they will be looked at, whether it's through using new technology to reduce the methane coming them, or a massive shift in what is grown and what is produced. It's a voluntary commitment, but it's exciting because it's there, and it's really important to what we do on food. So looking ahead to COP27 and beyond, we're in this really exciting stage of COP. I'm optimistic compared to what it could have been like. COP26, a lot is happening next year. We've got the Convention on Biological Diversity in China next year. That will decide the direction of nature policy and nature finance and a lot of agriculture for the next 10 years. The UK is going to sign up to it. It's going to be bringing biodiversity and climate together. And it is really important for the future direction of agriculture. So it's worth keeping an eye on that. It also means I'll be really surprised if the government doesn't start doing a lot more on biodiversity in the next few months, because there's one thing this government in the UK wants at the moment is to be seen as a leader in this field. And what's interesting is at local level, we're already seeing a couple of local authorities declaring climate and biodiversity emergencies. So Somerset have done it. So all the people living sort of in Bristol way, Somerset was the first county in the UK to declare a climate and a biodiversity emergency. They don't fully know what that means, but they've declared it, and that's a really interesting template. But then also going on, there's going to be things like Stockholm Plus 50, which is 50 years since the initial declarations on biodiversity and climate were declared. You've got the next COP in Egypt. That is exciting because it's the first African COP, and there's other things happening as well. And what we're seeing that's relevant to us is the subjects that are going to be coming up in the next year are the links between climate and nature. We know agroecology is going to be there. We know livestock is going to be there as well. And we know water is going to be there. And these are all relevant to food. They'll all be trailing down, because whatever gets agreed over the next year is going to be influencing the national government policies, and at local level we'll be looking to that because it'll give some of us the mandate to do what we really need to do. So just very quickly, so what else were we doing with Nourish Scotland? We did something called the Glasgow Process, which was a social movement of local actors driving global change. As I mentioned earlier, this was all about the fact that we were aware that national governments were failing, but locally we were doing it. We were also aware that there was a lot of people wanting to do more, lots of groups wanting to do more, but it was like, how can we facilitate this to engage in COP26? And so we had two strands to this. One was the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration, and one was the Fork to Farm dialogues. So the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration, it was a commitment by the subnational governments to declare climate emergencies, but also to help. We've been working with them for the last 18 months to help them support what this means, because we found a lot of local authorities in the UK, but in India, I work with people in, I don't know, in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Guatemala, in Ecuador, who they declared climate emergencies, but they didn't quite know what to do with it, or their leader would declare it and then not give anyone any power to do anything about it. So we were trying to help them understand not only to sign up to these declarations, but also the role that food and agriculture have in helping us meet the climate declarations and put pressure on the national leaders. And we already know that cities like Manchester, Lancaster, Leeds have all signed up to the Glasgow Declaration. It's fantastic. And this is going to be taken to the next COP, and it's going to be picked up by other governments, another organisation more relevant to Egypt, to try and keep putting the pressure on and building this movement. So national governments see that there are over 100 cities and subnational governments who want to do more on food and agriculture around climate. And then the final bit was the Fork to Farm dialogues, which I was managing the UK process for this. And this was all about building partnerships between cities, farmers and local authorities. And what we noticed while doing this, one thing was the relationships between farmers and cities and local authorities was often not really there. Farmers don't really talk to citizens that much. Citizens don't talk to farmers, but both were talking about the fact that they knew what the other wanted without talking to the others that much about what the other wanted. And Pete's idea was to bring them together, to have these conversations, to create trust between them so they could start having partnerships, and with a united voice talk to the local authorities and say, this is what we need. And this was important because I would work quite close to people like Birmingham, where the local authority, you could have up to 12 different departments internally who had a responsibility for one element of the food system. It could be procurement, it could be spending, it could be urban planning, it could be schools, whatever. But they never really had to talk to each other. And this makes a really messy way of engaging on food and farming. And so we tried to create a space where people could get together, have conversations and keep moving forward. And these went very well. I hosted dialogues at COP26 where we had groups from Dumfries and Galloway talking to farmers in the Philippines and talking to farmers in Kenya who shared the same worries about the future of food, the same frustrations about the lack of empowerment and the lack of trust that they have, but also the same ambition they have and the same views they had for food. Now, food is a really important engine for connecting people to nature and for making changes. And these are going to be going on. These dialogues, yes, COPs happened, but a lot of them we already know are carrying on. Some that weren't quite underway before COP are going to start next year. And this is great. This was the idea behind it, was that they would always carry on. They would become self-monitoring, self-sustaining forms, and that's what they're doing. And I could go on for ages, but that's kind of where we are with this. And it's a really exciting process. And I'd love to have conversations with anyone who's got questions about this. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Duncan. Could you that's it. Right, Maddie and I have been nattering to each other in behind the scenes here. Obviously, things, as always, run on, and it's really interesting stuff, but we've got a lot to get through. So what we're proposing is that we hear from Eleanor from Lancaster, and then a conversation with her and Rachel Marshall from Lancaster. We have a very brief contribution from Gary, as he's got to go and pick up his kids before we move into the breakout sessions. So Eleanor Huddlestone from Lancaster City Council, over to you.
Hi there, thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that okay. Great. Oh, well, thank you very much for inviting us along today to speak. Susanna Dart sends her apologies. She would have loved to have been here, but she's somewhere else, so she just asked if I'd come along. So yeah, thank you very much. My name's Eleanor Huddlestone, and yeah, I work in the planning policy team here at Lancaster City Council. Yeah, I've just been asked to come along today to talk a bit about how we've worked with organisations such as Food Futures, and also with Rachel on as part of the emerging urban research project, which I'm sure she'll tell you all about, to better incorporate food growing into planning policy. So I'll try to be quite quick because I know we've got quite a lot we want to get through. So I suppose the main reason that I'm here today and why we are where we are at Lancaster City Council is because, as you'll likely be aware, we have declared a climate emergency back in January 2019. And consequently, a number of changes are being actioned across the council within different departments. But I'm going to be specifically talking about what's been happening within our planning policy department, particularly in relation to the local plan. Just quickly before I go much further, I'm aware that not everyone will be familiar with Lancaster, so I just thought I'd, by way of a background, just provide a bit of a quick introduction. So just to provide some context, we're situated in northern Lancashire, bordering Cumbria, on the northwest coast of England along Morecambe Bay. We're home to 2 AONBs and also a small part of the Yorkshire Dales National Park. The population of the district is estimated to be approximately 148,119. As you'll see from the map, the western side of our district is much more populated in comparison to the east, with the majority of our urban areas located to the west of the M6, and that's reflective of the geographically diverse nature of the district. We operate within a 2-tier authority, so there's us at the district level and then Lancashire County Council, obviously at the county level. And it's estimated that there is up to 30% risk of food poverty in some areas of the district. So there's a real need to look at how we can reduce this risk. So as I mentioned, the council declared a climate emergency back in January 2019, setting out a commitment to become net zero by 2030. So this put tackling climate change at the heart of all the City Council's policies. The declaration also included a commitment to convene a citizens' assembly to help identify how our activities could be made net zero by 2030. So between February and October last year, 30 residents from across the district came together to take part in the first climate change people's jury in the district. And the big overarching question that they were looking at was, what do we need to do in our homes, neighbourhoods and district to respond to the emergency of climate change? As part of this, the jury came up with a series of 25 recommendations looking at things like communications, education and council leadership, food and farming, waste and recycling, housing and transport. Interesting, quite a number of the recommendations that they came up with have linkages with food and food growing. So I've just summarised these on the slide. So they're looking at things like improved education around food, reducing waste by promoting composting and recycling. We've also signed up to the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration. They also suggested incentives to local food producers, such as like free market stalls, establishing a proper market, or like producers under one roof, and things like that. And in planning policy, We've taken the recommendations from the People's Jury on board, and we've looked at how we can seek to address the recommendations that were raised through the local plan preparation process. So we went through all 25 to see how we might be able to address them. Some were a bit beyond the remit of policy, and I'll go on to explain that. But where we could make a difference in terms of policy and new development, we have sought to, so that we felt in relation to food, making it easier. So on there, making it easier for people to grow their own food was something in particular we could better incorporate into planning policy, which could then have a knock-on effect upon the other recommendations. And so providing the opportunity for people to be able to grow food for themselves, experience it for themselves, and we hope ultimately will help promote food growing and hopefully, go on a more larger scale. So yeah, we feel planning can play a role in providing the opportunity. So by the jury putting forward these suggestions around food production and local food supply chains, it made the case, and because the recommendation was put to us, for this to be explored further through policy. So that was something that came directly from the jury taking place. And then other aspects of the council looking at some of the other recommendations. And it's kind of out of this, it's kind of brought, because we all sort of work in different departments within the council, it's kind of brought us all together, and because it does kind of sit under the Communities Environment Directorate, but we've now created like a climate change hub within the council, so different people from different departments sit on there and discuss what we're all getting on with, and for a more collaborative approach. And out of the jury, there's sort of been more case for more climate change related jobs, like Susanna, and we're looking, and one of the things that they're looking at, their current projects, is working on an SPD, which goes into more detail around food growing, which I'll go on to talk about. So bearing that in mind, and given the focus of today's session around food policy, I'll just give a quick talk about where we're up to in planning policy in relation to the climate emergency and food growing. So yeah, this is just a bit of a background as to what is a local plan. I'm aware some of you will already know what one is, but yeah, it's a statutory document that sets out where development will and won't take place over the next decade or so. And it's the document that contains all the policies against which planning applications are determined. So this slide hopefully gives a bit of a picture of how the different plans link together, such as how national policy forms part of the development plan for the district, and how the plan has to be underpinned by like a raft of evidence, and that's sort of something I'll highlight later on, and that covers a wide range of topics. And then there's also a lot of public engagement on the plan, and this has all been relevant for the partial review that we're on with at the moment. So here in Lancaster, we're in a good and quite a unique position where we have a bang up to date local plan, which was adopted on the 29th of July last year, the cover of which is on the slide. So you might wondering, if we've just adopted one, why are we doing it again? Why are we reviewing it? Well, the key driving force behind it was the climate emergency declaration. At the time, the now adopted local plan was sort of too far advanced in its preparation. We'd already submitted it for examination to incorporate any further climate change amendments. So members requested that we went into an immediate review to reflect the climate emergency declaration, which is where we are at the moment. So this plan review focuses purely on climate change. So we're not looking at other issues like housing numbers and allocations. We've only looked at the policies in the plan, how they can be amended or added to reflect the climate change emergency. So it's been quite a fast-paced timetable. We're looking at about 30 policies. This is actually one of the challenges of the review, because climate change is such a far-reaching issue that it can be difficult to pin down where exactly planning can actually make a difference and what policies we should be looking at. So we did consultation on which policies we should be looking at and things. And yeah, we had a significant amount of support for the review that we're doing, which has been really encouraging. So how can the local plan help to tackle climate change? Well, it can help with adapting to the impacts of climate change and making buildings and places like more resilient by ensuring that land use decisions are sustainable and consider carbon impacts, as well as making new development in the district resilient and adaptable to change. It also has a role in providing energy efficiency standards in both new and existing buildings to reduce energy consumption and address fuel poverty. So that's something that's been a big part of the review. We're also looking at taking more positive approaches towards renewable energy, and also looking at how we can better promote and support opportunities for food growing spaces and composting. Unfortunately, we can't just stop development from taking place, which what some people would like to see, but it also has to work within the remit of national planning policy, the soundness requirements, and things like viability, to balance meeting the needs of the future generations and also protecting the environment. So yeah, in terms of the scope of the review, but yeah, it's specifically related to climate change. So it's not a comprehensive review, it's just a partial review. And because the last local plan took about 8 years to produce, so we're conscious that, it is a climate emergency declaration that we've made. So we sort of need to be getting on with it as soon as we can. So looking more specifically at food related planning policies, I've had the background. So as shown on the diagram on my earlier slide, evidence is really key to informing and underpinning the content and direction of policies within a local plan. To support this climate emergency local plan review, the council has for the first time produced a green and blue infrastructure strategy and an accompanying map to go alongside it. And so some of the main things that came out of that is that connectivity and multifunctionality of green and blue infrastructure is key, particularly in the face of climate change as a threat of increased fragmentation of habitats, dispersal of species, and the need to facilitate species movement to adapt to these changing conditions. We also felt it's important that it's not just one use for one space. So we've had applications come forward delivering green spaces, but quite often it can just be like a bench with some trees. And we want applicants to be more creative with space, think a bit differently and think outside the box. And how can that space meet a variety of needs and provide a variety of uses? Hence, in the document, we adopted a thematic approach around 6 key themes, highlighting the different recreational uses of green spaces. So it's not just for sport, but, there could be opportunities such as food growing. We're also primarily promoting the delivery of green and blue infrastructure on site with a GBI first approach as part of new development, thinking about where's the best place on site for GBI and food growing, as opposed to where's the best place for housing and roads first. So, so that, the delivery of green spaces is not just an afterthought, tick box exercise. It could also contribute via offsite via Section 106 contributions towards projects, but we really want primarily developers to think better about design and use of space within their developments. So in terms of food growing, evidencing that this is what people want and need, that is key. And the strategy also sort of emphasised that it's important to have a plan for the management for all GBI, and not just for play areas and things. And it has been sort of raised about community ownership and things like that, rather than it being private management companies. In the future, we hope to be able to identify more specifically opportunities for urban food growing, and this is a project that Rachel's working on, which she'll go on to talk about, I'm sure as well. And then within the strategy, consideration was also given to the wider socio-economic context. So we mapped the existing network and then looked at where we could explore opportunities. But then we also sat that within the wider socio-economic context, looking at things like access to green spaces, as not all green spaces technically freely accessible. Also, consideration was given to highlighting where food insecurities are concerned. So where might be green spaces best located. So this is an example of how we've sought to better incorporate food growing within our planning policies by providing the opportunity, requiring the space for food growing and composting to be provided as part of new development, and also thinking more broadly, as I mentioned in the GBI strategy, about the multiple functions and benefits that GBI can provide, which obviously includes like food growing and opportunities. So yeah, it aims to create the opportunity and the space for people to grow food for themselves, to experience it for themselves, which we think will be a big turning point. And like if people haven't done it before, don't know what it's like, it's a chance for them to do that. So we've popped this into the policy. We are actually doing more through policy, but we're kind of at quite a key stage at the moment where, so this was what we consulted on for Regulation 18, and we've received comments back. And we are at the Regulation 19 stage where we've taken on board those comments and amended the policies, but I'm unfortunately not able to show the amended policies because it's got to go to our members and full council, but they will be available to view. So keep your eyes peeled towards the end of January.
Just one more minute, Eleanor.
Okay, that's fine. So yeah, just to summarise, this is we're working on emerging SPD. And Susanna and Isabel, my colleagues, have been working with Food Futures in relation to the food growing element of this SPD. So this slide just sets out some of the key considerations that will be explored as part of the SPD. So it'll just provide some further guidance on the policy wording in DM29 that I just showed you. And just to it'll give developers a bit more of a steer and guidance, because yeah, evidence is really key. So I'll go on to my last slide, which sort of sets out like the positives and the challenges, and like the barriers when it comes to planning and creating a more localized, resilient food system. So yeah, I guess, yeah, crucially, what's been really important is the input and feedback from food partnerships and organisations through the consultation and collaboration, and that really helps drive the agenda and evidence the need. So working with people like Rachel on this, the GBI strategy is the evidence base. We've got the SPD that's now wording in the policy. We've got some great examples across the district to show like this is how it's been done before. We've got a really good working relationship with friends groups, and obviously the declaration itself and the people's jury recommendations have helped with that. Some of the more challenging side of things is that because it's been a partial review, there have been limitations. So we've not been able to look at actually allocating land for food growing at this stage, but that is something we're looking to do in the future. And we've not really known in the past which land is suitable, but there's a research project that Rachel with at the moment that might be able to help with that. Obviously the proof is going to be in the pudding because we've just set this policy wording out, so it's not been put into practice yet. There's obviously the viability pot as well, so there's other asks from as part of new development, highways, education, health. We've also got to work within the remit of national policy and the soundness requirements. And we're also, I think, one of the first within the UK to be doing this sort of a DPD, like a partial review specifically on climate change. So it's kind of a bit of a test case. And then ultimately, you know, planning can only do so much, but you know, it's about societal change, but, you know, we do recognise that planning has a role to play in providing opportunities. So, yeah, sorry, that's me done. Thank you.
No, it's brilliant. Thank you very much. It's absolutely brilliant.
I'll stop sharing. There we go.
It's I just want to bring in Rachel as well, who's also in Lancaster and very much involved in Food Futures, and comes from a kind of soil background, but he is leading on the food land mapping work in Lancaster and other things, and we've looked at some of the dynamic food procurement stuff together. So yeah, just bring you in, Rachel, and you can kind of, in conversation with Eleanor, however you want to do it, in terms of your perspectives about how this policy momentum and movement has kind of happened. And the interesting thing with, you know, with COP and then looking at Lancaster is that there's this top-down pressure through the global kind of conferences and so on, but there's very much this grassroots up pressure through people's juries and citizens' assemblies as well, like was said in Lambeth as well, where that's happened. So it's from shifting from feeling a sense that of how on earth do we influence things, to starting to see that there are multiple ways to influence that are starting to come out. But yeah, over to you. Just feel free.
Thank you, Maddie. Yeah, I haven't got any slides because I was going to have a bit more of a chat and a conversation. And thank you, Eleanor. That was really a really good, nice overview of what's been happening. And yeah, Maddie, you're right. It is. I think in Lancaster we're very lucky because we're a district within a county council. So we only have so many powers in the district council, but the powers that we do have are being used like quite interestingly and kind of in collaboration with local people and with partnerships like the Food Partnership, Food Futures. So I think there's a real nice thing about working at the local level, that you can build like proper kind of consultative processes in, and people can really engage, the citizens can really engage with it. So I was just going to highlight a few ways that as like a food partnership and as like I guess local citizens and also as people that work locally, we're lucky we have a couple of universities in Lancaster that do research that is quite relevant to a lot of climate change issues and ecological issues and farming as well. So I thought I'd just highlight a few ways that we're kind of, rather than just letting the policy happen, like trying to actually engage actively in it. And yeah, we will have parts to play, I think. So Food Futures is North Lancashire's Sustainable Food Places partnership. And it's been steadily growing since around 2014. It's a whole mixture of organisations, and it basically creates a forum for us all to come together under different kind of themes to work on food issues in our district. And this means that you get kind of policymakers mixing with researchers, mixing with food producers and food activists, a whole range of different people that are involved. And this has been like a really useful place for kind of understanding how we can all kind of help what we're trying to do, and we all kind of share, like create shared visions for what we're trying to do. And interestingly enough, the people's jury recommendations around food also reflected a process, or the recommendations or visions that came out of a process that Food Futures did of creating a food strategy for North Lancashire. So there are really some really similar ideas around what people want to see for food and farming and how we're treating our land in a district. So it naturally kind of aligns really well with sort of what the council is trying to deliver too. So some ways that we've been kind of engaging, I'll start with the really kind of the basic way, I guess. We engage with the consultation process that Eleanor mentioned around kind of what do you want to see be reviewed in the local plan, and then how, like, once the local plan had been reviewed, like commenting on what we saw. And although we didn't actually have any professional working on planning policy, a group of us got together and put ideas together, and then we kind of collated it and put it in. And I think this is something that's really useful, because quite often the people that respond to consultations are either individuals who maybe are talking about housing near their area, or you get lots of developers kind of, I saw there a question in the chat from Lucy saying, do you expect pushback from developers? So I think it's really valuable to have food partnerships and other people feeding in and kind of giving positive and also critical feedback as well. So yeah, we had questions around land allocation, which obviously Eleanor mentioned isn't something they can review, but it was something we'd love to see be reviewed in the future. And then the other thing we can do is we're going to provide hopefully lots of case studies. So we know there's lots of interesting things happening in the district around food growing, around permaculture design of food growing spaces, multifunctional spaces. So something we're trying to do is to collate all these to create case studies that then can go into the documents that can provide kind of local based evidence for the policymakers that this can happen here, this is already happening here, and this is what we'd like to see more of. And then we can collaborate. So yeah, we've collaborated in a few different ways. Eleanor mentioned this research project that I'm doing around mapping land across the district. So that kind of came out of our food strategy process, because we wanted to do a land audit to know, as many of you probably also want to know, like how do we identify land, how do we find out who owns land, how do we get access to more land for food growing in our district. But then we got chatting to the council, and they've obviously got some really useful data sets that they've created as part of their green and blue infrastructure strategy, which now I've had a chance to like use. And incorporate that into our land mapping to also bring in kind of hopefully in the next few months some soil scientists to do some soil testing on sites that have been identified. So by collaborating, we can kind of add and build on the data sets and build on the evidence that the policymakers need. And that's useful, I guess, having a university or a source of research funding that can enable someone to have the time to do that. And then the other thing we're collaborating on is by having like a clear vision of what we're trying to do in our district with the People's Jury recommendations, the food strategy. We've gone for some National Lottery climate action funding, and we've just been awarded that, and that will help deliver a lot of the different types of recommendations from the People's Jury that maybe can't be delivered through policy. So we can kind of support that council-led process as a People's Jury and say, well, yes, you said you'd like these things to happen, and then we're going to actually try and make some of those things happen. So yeah, I think, do you have anything else to add, Eleanor? I think it's just very useful having people in the council that are focusing on climate change, but having a forum that brings us together.
Yeah, no, it's been really great, and like we've really appreciated your comments to help feed into the pod, because that's been like really great and really helpful. And I know like my colleagues have had separate conversations with you with regards to the SPD and what can better go into that. So yeah, it's been a really, really good like collaborative process, as you've been saying.
Thanks very much. Gary's going to go get his kids in about 2 minutes. So here you go, Gary. Any quick comment on the work in Wales?
Yeah, okay, I'll give you a very quick one. I was just starting to type something in the text. So I guess we've got some very key overarching policies in Wales. We've got a thing called Future Wales, which is our top level of planning policy. Really broad, ambitious piece of paper. It's only just been launched. Sort of indicates to local authorities what should be happening, where and how and why, and how that should be supported. We've then got things like Future Generations Act, obviously been around a few years, quite groundbreaking policy, but actually very little implementation or let's say reach to challenge that, or if people don't do what they should be doing under that, we really struggle to challenge local authorities around it, but it is there. The Environment Act in Wales is pretty strong, and that's pretty good. Recent years, we've been working really hard on sustainable farming reviews, CAP reform, all that sort of stuff, and that is now just about to start working its way into legislation. But to give you an idea of timeframes, it's not till 2025 that will become legislation in Wales. And we're in 2021 now, and our money is now coming from Westminster. £40 million reduction this year from Westminster into what should be our CAP reform payment system. So that's just interesting dynamics. And then I guess you just got a clock. We've got a Labour government in Wales, not quite a Labour stronghold. Much of our future money comes via Westminster. And at the moment, a lot of that is trying to be diverted direct to local authorities. So they are doing their best to bypass Welsh Government to the best of their ability. Oh, and in the main funding Conservative council areas, which is interesting under their levelling up policy. Plaid and Labour have just signed a cooperative deal. It's not quite a coalition government, but it theoretically gives Labour that one extra seat majority that they needed to what they call fast track policies through. The detail of that agreement has just come out, and some of it's quite interesting. So they have just committed to free school meals in all primary schools, universally, across the board, no checks and balances against that. And that was one thing that lots of people have been lobbying for. It also lists dynamic procurement around food and other infrastructure as one of the key agreement policies within the deal. And it also lists farming as one of their key concerns from Plaid, as in Labour haven't got farming very right in Wales, perhaps in terms of policy. North Conservative perhaps, but Plaid think they can do it better. So that agreement is going through the membership of Plaid. It probably will be signed off, and therefore then we have a sort of coalition government. However, at the same time, just last week, we had a private member's bill accepted through the Senedd, led by a Conservative minister, who has now got a Food Bill Wales Act through primary legislation in the Senedd. He's got 30 months to write up the detail with it, and then it gets voted on to become legislation. So if that gets through from Mr. Pete Fox, I should say, not Frost, Pete Frost is a very good chap, we'll have a new set of Conservative-led legislation around food implemented in Wales 2.5 years ahead of Wales Agriculture Bill. And that's interesting. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. And you could bet your bottom dollar that's why Plaid and Labour have started to do their coalition agreement in the hope that they can fend that one off when it comes to the point of voting. And then at the same time, as an absolute frustration, the Food and Drink Division in Wales, which control and administer things like the new community strategy coming forward, and the agricultural bill reform, have just launched their new vision for Wales. And their vision talks around mass production, primary production, if you like, because they see that that's a multi-million/billion-pound industry, whereas farming isn't. It's a drain on resources. So we've got these two competing massive bits of policy: cap reform and farming sustainability, whilst producing billions of pounds worth of economic value into Wales, please, almost via any means. So there's a lot of interesting policy at the moment. It's a really busy space. We're doing our best through Food Policy Alliance Cymru to sit on all of it and do what we can. But we've now been officially recognised as a lobbying group, and therefore our access to ministers directly has really diminished, and senior officers, but we can still do it for me. So that's my 5-minute roundup of what's going on in Wales. Great to see you all. Interesting to hear your case studies and the work that's going on elsewhere as well. Give me a bell if you need anything.
Thank you, Gary. Have you shared your email or anything, or if you want to?
I'll let Lucy do that. Yeah, awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. That was a whole lot of information. I wonder, does anyone just need a minute to go to the loo, grab some water? Would that be good? Literally, we can just take a minute to have a breather and let all that kind of percolate for a moment before we go into our breakouts. So see you back here in 1 minute.
Hi. Hi, Maddie.
I can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Yeah. What a lot of stuff going on, huh?
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, fab. I think if we ask Karen, Miriam, and Patricia to add stuff through the breakouts rather than, because we won't have time to do a separate slot with them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I've set up the breakout rooms.
Okay. I am just going to nip out to the loo.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
the intention.
Cinema.
Lucy, I was wondering if you wanted to come along to our Foodland Mappers thing, if that was of interest.
Yeah. I'm sure I can add a few bits and bobs.
Just to sort of, I mean, we've got the meeting and the agenda all set up, but if you wanted to just kind of dip in and observe and hear what
is that one of the breakout rooms now, you think?
No,
or is this something else?
Yeah, it's a separate thing in December that we've met a few times. It's specifically people doing mapping of food growing lands. I just thought it might be something you might like to connect into.
I'm familiar with some local authorities doing a bit of mapping, and I'd rather they didn't spend too much time on that, because what they do then is pause the whole process of allowing groups to come forward with sites while they get on with their mapping. And quite often some of the mapping doesn't really turn up any sites that are, sort of particular use of food growing.
Right.
But there is value in doing it. I do agree, yes.
There aren't any local authority officers in this group. It's all other kind of project academics or other
right,
like, yeah. So it's just an interesting one to dip into, see what other kind of approaches to mapping and data collection are going on outside local authorities as well.
Yeah, we're doing some work on our Resilient Green Spaces programme, which is a new programme funded by Welsh Government around mapping. And my colleague Anne-Marie would definitely like to come along as well, if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think that would be useful, Lucy, as someone that is doing mapping, because our project came out of a need for mapping here as a food partnership. But I think having a critique of it is also really useful, or like none of this is useful, or yeah, how can we determine like where might be useful for growing food? Different viewpoints, and that would be valuable.
Yeah, mapping land ownership for me is always a very useful thing to do. And also not precluding areas where soil isn't great, as long as it's not contaminated. There's still potential to grow on it.
Great. I'll send you the invite, and Anne-Marie and Fee as well. Thank you, Sarah.
Sure.
I'll invite her to that as well.
Thanks.
So great. Thank you everybody so much for those presentations. And there are a couple of questions that came out of that in the chat, but maybe hold on to those and see if you can raise them in the breakouts as well. So I've put people fairly randomly into groups, but hopefully, you know, I know that you'll have very, very rich discussions, and it's always difficult to sort of separate out a group because everyone wants to hear what everybody else is saying, but you can't always have both. We've sort of come up with a couple of questions to sort of help frame the discussion. So what's one thing that you've learned or heard from the presentations that will help you make policy progress or overcome a barrier or challenge in your place or in your work? So how is what you've heard going to help you in some way? The second question, which I'm trying to cut and paste from here, is and what are some of the narratives or bits of language that we can use to bring about richer conversations and better decisions, particularly around food and climate? So we heard things like avoiding maladaptation, or about the interlinking of nature, food, climate, and social justice, social well-being, and how that is starting to be a given at the very highest levels. So what are the kind of the narrative pieces and things that we can use and that you can use in your own relationships, in your own context, to help accelerate progress? So hopefully when we go to the breakout rooms, they will still appear in the chat for you. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms, and we've got, so it's just coming up to 3. So we'll have, I think, 15 minutes to cover both of those questions. So I hope that will be fruitful, and have good chats. Can you see your thingies coming up? There we go.
Doesn't say how to join it. Oh, I see. Yeah.
I haven't been able to assign us.
Ah, well, that's okay. We can have a chat.
Well, I want to join one. How do we do that? Or maybe I think we just go to room 5 and then join.
You're going to go in room 5, are you?
Well, there's four people in room 5.
Will you go
and 5 in all the others.
Well, if you go in room 5, then I'll join in the one with Simon Blenkinsop from Middlesbrough, as he hasn't said anything.
Yeah, I wanted to put him. Yeah, I've thought about who I was putting people with, so hopefully they'll have some good conversations. Like Joe in Middlesbrough wanted to have a question about planning. So
okay, I'll go into room 3 then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. See you in a bit.
Sure. See you in a bit.
Quite a while, weren't interested and now are, you know, so.
And sorry, one final question, and I'll stop hogging it all. Is there is there some kind of consequence for non-compliance?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Not at the moment. But that's that whole rift, you know, that whole kind of between national and local governments, that whole kind of piece. So we're trying to get them to want to do stuff and recognize that it ties into and there's a lot of shift internally with some of the roles as well, because it used to be, for instance, in Fife, the sustainability team weren't near the environment green space team, and now they're sort of coming together. So, you know, that transition is you know, a good sign that they're preparing to link some of these agendas, etc. And then we'll add another one in. As soon as they've linked them, we'll say, now health, good soils. So we do see movement, but if there isn't a body like ourselves to support that, I think it would have taken longer, to be absolutely honest.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I'm also interested in the, you know, shows my naivety and just sort of I don't understand the whole kind of policy thing that, you know, I was under the impression that, well, if it's written into policy, therefore it's a given. But no, that's not the case, is it? If it's not monitored, I mean, who's checking up on it? Who's saying that they're doing it? And obviously there's the compliance element. But if there are certain things, and maybe where we are, you know, relating to kind of food growing and other kind of, you know, positive sort of healthy and sustainable food elements, if they're not that kind of, you know, statutory, they have to kind of do it, then what scope or what is there, what mechanisms are needed to kind of ensure that they are actually doing what they kind of said that they would do?
Well, the Good Food Nation bill sets out to put, well, we're working with the Scottish Food Coalition, including Nourish. We're working they've asked a few questions to a few groups, and we're looking at what the targets would be. So the big thing for the Scottish Food Coalition and Nourish, and Pete at Nourish is a food commission to oversee some of this. But Good Food Nation one, but we have an opportunity to put a bit more meat on the bone for this one, to be honest, through using other bills to do that. So that's what we're hoping just to connect them all in the heads of some of the officials we work with in the Scottish government and at a local level. But it was so interesting to hear the planning work that's going on. That was very helpful for me to hear that, how they're doing that internal work. I don't know how you guys felt about that, what you picked up from that.
I mean, planning seems to be, you know, I've had a number of conversations. I mean, our local plan isn't yet, it's still under review and still kind of out to consultation, all of this kind of stuff. And I am banging on the door. I've kind of got food well and truly into the green and blue infrastructure strategy here in Middlesbrough, which is a positive. But I'm also then kind of, when talking to planning, oh, we need more evidence, what, you know, and I'm just kind of, you know, what is the evidence? What are these evidence documents, and how can I start? I mean, the one thing that I've really pulled out of this is this people's forum, or what do they call the people's jury in Lancaster, and we have a climate action Middlesbrough or climate action funding project happening at the moment that has a people's forum, and I will push for that and try and get, you know, make sure food is high up on the agenda to get some information from that to then use as more kind of pressure. But that one of these said kind of, you know, evidence documents or kind of what, and then what else can I facilitate to kind of, you know, stick under the noses of kind of, or, you know, even if I believe our planning chap is really supportive of this, and so what other ammunition can I give him to get this through, to get really positive stuff through, you know? And that to me is where I see my role is just kind of, I'll throw in consultation as much as I possibly can, but it's facilitating others to do the same. I just wondered if anybody has any other kind of insights and that type of stuff.
I'll just say one more thing. We have a colleague who used to work within Aberdeen Council, and she is a solicitor, and she's done a lot of work with us in our community land advisory service. Now she's a freelance planner. And she basically, when she was working in that space, because she knew how to navigate it so well, she managed to get food really integrated into Aberdeen's plans. And what we've asked her to do, she's going to take there's 5 plans up for review this coming year in Scotland. She's going to take a couple of them to see what has transpired around the food agenda. Now, I wouldn't even know where to begin. So planning's not my thing, but she's going to take a look to see what could have happened, what didn't happen, and why didn't it happen, just for 2 plans, to see where that can be addressed when it comes up for review again. So she's doing a sample. I can share that work with you. I don't know what it's about. It's not my thing, but everyone who I talked to about quite excited about it, because she did manage, because she knew how to work the system, you know, and we just don't have time to take all that on. So
I wonder the evidence that you could use, and I don't know what kind of evidence you're looking for, but I'm working with some other universities to put together a research proposal for nature-based therapies, and there's this big drive for social prescribing, and what horticulture, community gardens included, can do with social prescribing. So therapies for people with mental health or mild mental health problems, and how gardening or food growing can improve their mental conditions. And so there are studies, plenty of evidence on that. And I was reading a few days ago on The Guardian. I haven't had time to verify this, but the NHS has publicly declared interest in stepping up with prevention, which means that means investing in green infrastructure and social prescribing this way. How social prescribing can cut pressure on the NHS in terms of treatments and health professionals involved in treatment. So I think that probably one of the things that is helpful when you talk with policymakers is to give a range of benefits, not only one, not only food growing, but multiple benefits that urban agriculture, food growing can do. Yes, there are communities benefits. Yes, there are social benefits, but there is also an advantage in health that is also coinciding with strategic priorities of the NHS.
Yeah, I agree. I think, from all different angles, as in, health, mental, physical. But I guess as well, that a point was mentioned before about as well, when something's ticking boxes like that, it's great. Then as a council, I think someone mentioned that you then find that you're liaising with someone from one department and another department as well. So that's just, I'm in agreement with you, but just, I'm acknowledging that barrier. I know whenever I get involved in a project, so I'll be a contact from the sustainability angle, but then planning, like even myself, you might know a couple of names here or there, but it's, I guess, within the council, I think we've got to improve, and it'll be like this for all councils, working across departments to really set up working groups internally and things to tackle problems, rather than it just being seen as an extra thing, just, oh, could you help out on this, but really having like strong working groups, because as you say, like public health would our department, public health, planning, us as a team, our catering department, everyone needs to work as one. So like definitely it ticks all those boxes, and then it benefits. It's got so many benefits, but also that's one of the barriers sometimes.
Isn't that, isn't that a food partnership?
Well, so I guess
that kind of thing. I'm just like,
well, that would be an internally
thinking,
one. Yeah, well, that's
right.
So we have one internally we need to have that, but also actually we are looking in Leeds at the moment to set up a public sector partnership as well across, the hospitals, because everyone obviously is on their agenda, but it's about linking up to have those networks. So obviously this is a great one for networking across, the UK and Northern Ireland and everything, but yeah, I think it's about having those right people in the room to, but you know, well, so as a city of Leeds, I guess it's anyways just sort of depends on how that city works and what, or that region and what they've got set up, because
Okay. Do we need to do screen share again, or
Not yet.
not yet? Not so keen.
Brilliant. God, doesn't time fly when you're in a breakout room? Note to selves, double the amount of time that you think is necessary. Okay, so with all that swimming round, there's a link in the chat to a Mentimeter, which hopefully will work straight away when you click on it, and you'll be able to just sort of brain dump your thoughts as you're mulling them over.
Where is it, Maddie?
In the chat.
You might need to repost it.
I have reposted it.
Okay.
Can anyone see it?
No.
No.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Copy, paste.
There you go.
Maybe I did it before everyone had come back into when everyone was somewhere in cyberspace. So it follows the two questions that is everyone getting in without the code? It's not being asked for a code. In case you are, there's a code. And just reflecting on these questions, something that you've learned or heard that will help you make policy progress or overcome a barrier or challenge in your place or in your work. And if there's anything, and that can be something from the presentations or something from your discussion, of course.
And please also use this to put any positive comments in, like very useful, look forward to the next one, because we'll be using this for when we are trying to justify future resourcing for the project. The feedback from these sessions actually helps inform what we will do next. So it'll be very useful.
So, does this seem to be working for people?
Yeah, I'm just slow typing.
I can see people typing furiously.
Great. I've got. Oh, here they come.
Mm-hmm. 'Cause, 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 'cause
As you're doing that, I'm going to share my screen, and so you'll be able to see what each other is writing as it comes up. I think things might be taking a little while to come through. I've got here it's come. So sustainable maintenance plan has been developed. Lancaster review of local plan with climate lens, multifunctional spaces, use of socio-economic arguments. Rewriting the local plan for an emergency response. The importance of statutory duties. I've got a feeling that more than 4 people have written something in.
At least 4 comments, but none of them have come up yet. Is it time for a refresh?
Let's see. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop my share. They are coming through slowly. Using climate hubs to bring different departments together, working across silos. We write a more joined up approach to decision making across directorates to tackle the climate emergency. So this cross-sectoral working, very key. The importance of a multiplicity of argument. The need to use words wisely. Always difficult to translate policies into action on the ground. Create case studies and gather people's forum recommendations. Very useful collaboration between policymakers and community seems key. Focusing on multi-use green spaces. These will all be, they'll all be saved and shared as well. Interesting to hear from other regions. There's also a second question, which I think if you've got a prompt to go to the second question. Can you see that? Let's have a look. Really slick with my tech here. Okay, so so yeah, so the narratives, the language, that's, yeah, okay, so you got that, you have got that one as well. Richer conversations and better decisions. Great. So I'll just read out some of those. Simple, clear and exciting for communities. Participatory, people's juries, assemblies, having a climate change hub in the council, connecting biodiversity, especially pollinators, with creating food growing space, providing about the range of benefits to make a better case for sustainable food in policy. Climate and nature emergency, bringing those things together, ensuring agroecology is used. Also, diversity and equity elements is really key, showing how this can benefit people from different backgrounds. Developing good relations with council officers. Framing, climate emergency, biodiversity, and health. Those together in the same frame. Always provide examples of what the community is doing already. Develop a pushback against food spaces in the local plan in Newport because not enough evidence given. Lancaster Climate Hub is reducing silo thinking. Showing that local decisions fit into a wider popular narrative, i.e. not cutting grass verges fits in with the all-island pollinator plan. Having case studies from different councils and food partnerships has been very interesting and informative, so please keep doing that, please. I think what we're aiming towards is to kind of be pooling best practice in terms of case studies and policy developments to have a kind of work towards some kind of templates or toolkits or, you know, learn sort of knowledge sharing documents so people can learn from.
Yeah, so just on that, in the interest of trying to finish at 4:30, although we might stretch it by 5 minutes. If I just go back to the slides for the last couple of minutes, Maddie.
Go for it.
If I can find it, here we go. So I need to put that one on, haven't it? There you go. Right, so in brief, thanks very much for your contributions and thanks to everyone who's taken the time out. A couple of people have left, leaving comments saying they look forward to the next one. I'd like to apologise to Patricia, Miriam and Karen, because we did ask them if they make a contribution, but we simply haven't had time. But maybe we can do that another time or in the Northern Ireland or Scottish forums separately. So this is what we've got planned, and the shape of pings to come is another one of my little funny jokes, ha ha. But we've got the 4th Northern Ireland workshop on the 17th of January with Miriam and Patricia. Then we say on the 22nd of February, the next ping meeting will probably not be the planning and policy one. We'll probably put that on the 26th of April. And we're going to juggle those around and talk to participants. And as I mentioned before, various people have expressed an interest. But let us know what themes you would like to discuss. We're going to publicise these dates in advance to our partners in Sustain and Sustainable Food Places and other people to try and avoid this sort of overlap of, you know, parallel conversations going on at the same time. But then we've got another meeting, the wider interest group, on the 31st of May, which will be a year on from the first wider interest group. And at that one, what we'll be doing is compiling the raft of good policy exemplars from the UK, from New York, from wherever else, perhaps working with Nourish and looking at that as a sort of route to COP27 and have that as possibly a template for urban agroecology policy or whatever we want to call it. But we'd also ask you through your networks to spread the word, so that let us know who you'd like us to invite to future wings or pings for that matter, or if you'd like to set one up in your region, let us know, we'll see what we can do. And then this was what came out of the previous meeting. We'd like this movement to be bold and radical and think urgently. So that's from me. Maddie, do you want to?
Yeah, do you want to just stop your screen shares? Brilliant. Yeah, yeah, we need more time, but thank you so much everybody for the time that you've given. And it's hard to sort of just leave with a head full of all of that, but hopefully you'll be able to just have a moment to sit with a cup of tea and let it all percolate through. And yeah, really want to hear your feedback about the content and the format and future pings and all of that, as Jeremy said as well. Hope you found it useful, and hope you make connections with each other directly as a result of these sessions that we have together. Yeah, Joe.
It was just I would like to contact a couple of people that I haven't yet sort of discussed. So our email address is going to be shared. I'm happy for mine to be, I suppose it's a question for the room.
Yeah, do you want to put your hand up if you're not, if you don't want your email shared? Great. Okay, Eleanor, I can't, and Janie, is that okay with you as well? Just give us a thumbs up. Great. I can check with Janie afterwards. Brilliant. Was it just that, Joe? Yeah. Okay, great. Yes, do please make the most of each other. And thank you all very much for being here. Thank you, Duncan and Rachel and Eleanor, Gary, who's gone, and all of you for everything that you've brought, and long may it continue. Have a lovely rest of your day. Any comments?
Great day.
Please stay on if you want to talk about anything as well.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Cheers, Connor. Thanks, Janie. Are you all right for your email to be shared with the group, Janie? Great. Okay, lovely. Hi, Tony.
Hi, you guys. Thank you so much. Well done. Actually, I wanted to